The film opens with a young man named Raymond riding in a car with his mother, Jenny. She's driving him to a training camp for a competition called the Long Walk, or as some call it, the Death Race. This competition was established by the government to build a strong nation capable of withstanding life's hardships. As they approach the camp gate, Jenny pleads with Raymond to reconsider his decision, fearing he will die and she won't see him again. However, Raymond remains resolute, telling her he must win the race to avenge his father, William. Raymond bids Jenny farewell, promising to win and return to her. At that moment, Raymond enters the camp and meets a racer named Peter. While they wait for the major, the founder of the death race, they meet several more racers. There are 50 racers in total. The first they meet is a strong young man named Steve, obsessed with sports and aloof from conversation. The second young man is Olsen and Bacon are in the race, their primary goal being to win and claim the huge cash prize, hoping to change their lives. They then meet a young man named Arthur who seems anxious about the race but tries to pretend it will be easy for him as he's used to walking. Next, they see an 18-year-old boy trying to prepare for the race, but he appears scared. Seconds later, the major, the founder of the death race, arrives and reminds the racers of Rule 13, which states they must conserve their energy for the race. He then calls out their names and gives them their numbers, which they will wear around their necks. Once the major finishes the stage, he lines them up in front of him and explains the basic rules of the race. The race will now last for many miles, and anyone who stops in the way will receive 1 or 2 warnings. On the third warning, the soldiers will shoot them. The major encourages them before the race begins. He tells them that there are 50 racers, but only one will win. The winner will receive a huge cash prize and be granted any wish, no matter what it is. He also says that the goal of this race is to build strong men so that the country can become #1 in the world. Then the race begins, and the 50 racers start walking. 3 tanks with cameras recording the event surround them. The soldiers are riding in the tanks holding their weapons. The soldiers' purpose is to warn the racers against stopping and to finish off anyone who decides to give up. At this point, the race is still in its early stages, and no one feels tired or finds the walking difficult. So Raymond, Peter, and Wallace walk alongside each other, getting to know each other better and chatting about various topics to entertain themselves. Suddenly, one of the racers named Jerry gets a stone in his shoe and is forced to sit down. Gary takes off his boots to pick up the stone, but the soldiers surround him, point their weapons at him, and give him a first and second warning. They are moments away from killing him, but at the last second, Gary gets up and keeps walking. Raymond and Peter are surprised that Gary was about to sacrifice himself at the beginning, but he tells them that he did it to get half a minute to rest. They mock him because what he did could have made him the first victim. Then Peter asks Raymond about his opinion on the competition, and Raymond replies that the competition is trivial to him because he sees it as them gathering 50 people to put them through a deadly test and deciding that there will be only one winner, which is a crime against humanity. He tells them that he is not interested in the monetary prize and that he has another goal that he wants to win to achieve. The racers continue joking around until suddenly someone behind them, who had been writing down their names and numbers, reveals that he is a writer and has decided to enter the race to write a book about everything that will happen. A few seconds later, Raymond sees an 18-year-old boy with a leg cramp, unable to put weight on his feet. Raymond rushes to him and tries to help him, managing to calm the young man down until he can walk. Unfortunately, the boy suddenly collapses and the soldiers surround him with their weapons, issuing the first and second warning. Sadly, the boy cannot get up before the third warning, and the soldiers shoot him. He becomes the first casualty of the race, and the other racers are shocked, but they continue walking without stopping. At mile 17, Raymond feels tired and can't imagine winning the race like this, so Peter advises him to just take it one step at a time, to give himself hope with each step. Then Peter asked Raymond, who formed his opinion about the race, which he mentioned earlier. Raymond tells him that his father, William, instilled in him the truth about the corrupt system because he was a wise and free man who completely rejected the system's policies. Then Peter decides to talk about himself and tells Raymond that he used to want to be a lyricist, but everything changed when the competition came along.
At that moment, Olsen and Worcester join the conversation and tell each other that they must enjoy the race, even though it's still in its early stages, and continue as a team. They call themselves the Knights. Suddenly, without warning, they see one of the racers become exhausted and collapse to the ground, and the other racers watch as he dies. Unfortunately, Gary keeps mocking him, saying that the fun has begun, and the race will be easier with each one of them falling and dying. Ars gets angry and tells him to stay away from them. After 25 miles, they start to feel a little tired, so they get up to eat something light to give themselves energy. However, Olsen is getting tired from walking and his leg hurts, so they advise Raymond to slow down so he can continue. Olsen listens to Raymond's advice and regains his balance. Raymond then notices that Peter's body is covered in scars and decides to ask him about them, but Peter refuses to tell him anything. At that moment, Olsen's food falls from his hand and he can't get up to retrieve it. So Raymond takes out some food he has and gives it to Olsen. Olsen is overjoyed and thanks Raymond for helping him. At the same time, we see the bully Gary harassing and insulting one of the racers. The young man gets angry and tries to hit him, but Gary is much faster and agile, easily dodging all his blows and mocking him. The shot comes when the young man becomes enraged when Gary reveals his mother's secret and recklessly attacks him. Unfortunately, he trips and falls face first, unable to get up. The soldiers repeatedly give him 3 warnings and then finish him off because he doesn't get up. At this point, Raymond Worser accuses Gary of killing the young man, but Gary claims the young man attacked him first and refuses to admit guilt, insulting anyone who blames him. A little while later, one of the racers is in a desperate need to use the restroom and is forced to stop in the middle of the track due to the pain. Tragically, the soldiers shoot and kill him for stopping. The tension rises as night falls, and suddenly, without warning, Raymond falls asleep. While he sleeps, he has a dream. Jenny, his mother, sings him his favorite song. The dream is very short, but when Raymond wakes up, Peter tells him he slept for 3 hours straight and that he was supporting him. Raymond thanks him and tells him about the dream, and they joke together. Afterwards, Raymond tells Peter he promised Jenny he would win the race and come back to her. But suddenly, Raymond can't put any weight on his leg. As they go up the slope, the soldiers keep giving him warnings, so they quickly pull Peter along and try to support him so he can keep going. But at that point, the tension increases among the racers, and some can't withstand the pressure and give up. Of course, the soldiers kill anyone who stops without mercy. Raymond feels scared and can't breathe, so Peter calms him down and splashes water on his head. He continues to support him until they cross the slope safely. By the beginning of the next day, they have covered a distance of 59 miles. Raymond and Peter find Olsen silent and barely able to walk without saying a word. They approach him to try and revive him, but suddenly they look behind them and see that the rider's leg is broken and he can't put any weight on it. Raymond is deeply affected as he sees the soldiers killing the rider right before his eyes. At this moment, Peter tries to calm Raymond and asks him to control his emotions so he can continue. Later, Major meets them and congratulates them on completing 100 miles, encouraging them to fight to the end. But then, Raymond and Peter find Steve, the strongest of all the competitors, exhausted and out of breath. Steve tells them he has an allergy that occurs once a year, and unfortunately, it struck him today. Despite this, Steve decides to endure it to win the race. Afterwards, Peter asks Raymond, Olsen, and Worster about their wishes if they win the race. Arthur says he wants a space rocket to go to the moon. Olsen says he wants to travel the world and live the luxurious life he dreams. Peter says he wishes his friends a decent life with the money he wins. Raymond says he hasn't thought about a wish because he doesn't feel he'll win, even though the number of contestants has decreased to 15. Gary mocks him, saying he's lying and doesn't want to reveal his wish. Raymond gets upset and tells Gary not to talk to him, especially since Gary was responsible for the death of one of their classmates. Afterwards, they all sing to distract themselves from the challenge. That night, Raymond falls asleep again, and Peter stays with him until he wakes up. At the beginning of the third day, Raymond takes his baseball out of his bag, and he and Peter play while walking. But suddenly, they look behind them and see Arthur with a stomach ache.
He desperately needs to relieve himself, so Raymond and Peter urge him on, because soldiers have him surrounded and are giving him warnings. At the last moment, Arthur gets up and continues walking, but when he gets close to Peter and Raymond, they ask him to move away because his smell is unpleasant. Then Raymond talks to Peter and decides to confess the real reason he entered the race. He tells him it's to avenge his father's death at the hands of the Major. Raymond begins by telling Peter that William, his father, was a liberal teacher who hated the corrupt regime and advised people to demand their rights from the government. Unfortunately, one day they were sitting together peacefully when the Major suddenly attacked him and had his soldiers tie William up. The Major wanted to force William to become loyal to the corrupt regime in exchange for. He lets him live, but then William refuses to comply with the Major's demands and bids farewell to Jenny and Raymond. Unfortunately, the Major kills William in front of Raymond in a gruesome scene. Because of this, Raymond tells Peter that if he wins the race, he will ask the Major for a weapon and finish him off to avenge his father. But then Peter calms Raymond down, telling him that revenge will destroy him, and urging him to forget the idea because his mother is waiting for him to return to her. They learn that even if he kills the Major, his men will finish him off, and then Jenny's heart will break for him as it did for his father before him. After that, they continue on their way and travel more than 170 miles, but then one of the racers gets tired of walking and runs towards the soldiers to ask them to withdraw. Unfortunately, the tank driver runs him over as he walks, severing his leg. Later that same night, after they have traveled 203 miles, Raymond suddenly finds Olsen unable to walk. Olsen then decides to attack the soldiers, but unfortunately they kill him. Arthur runs to Olsen and tries to help him up, but the soldiers keep warning him. Before they can finish, Raymond runs quickly and pulls him away, forcing them to let Olsen face the fate he chose. On the fourth day, we see Parker shocked by what Olsen did. Peter tells him that he respected Olsen because he chose to die peacefully. But then Parker surprises Peter by revealing that Olsen is married and wanted to win to fulfill his wife's wish of becoming a famous singer. Peter looks around and sees despair in Parker and Arthur's eyes, so he calms them down and tells them that they are a team and will fight together until the end. At that moment, Gary feels alone and that none of them have met him since he caused their comrade's death. That's why he approaches Raymond and tells him that feeling guilty about what he did. Gray tells Raymond he didn't mean to. He then asks Raymond to get Peter to take him on, explaining that he's never had friends and always had to be aggressive to make others acknowledge him. Raymond assures him he'll convince Peter to let him on, but unfortunately, Peter can't forgive Gray and refuses. Gray feels unwanted and decides to kill himself without thinking. He pulls someone out and repeatedly stabs himself in the neck, but the soldiers keep issuing warnings before finally killing him. On the fifth day, after traveling 278 miles, Parker talks to Raymond, telling him they're nearing the state where Raymond lives and Jenny is waiting for him there. Parker encourages him to stay strong until he can reassure his mother. Parker is sad because he wants to go home too and envies Raymond. Because he's the only one who can see his family, they walk another 8 miles and reach the state where Raymond lives. But suddenly Raymond's shoe breaks and he can't walk. Peter is advised to take off his shoe and walk barefoot. Raymond has to listen, even though he's worried about hurting his foot and not being able to finish the race. Seconds later, Raymond sees Jenny waiting for him on the road, waving to him. He runs to her, crying, and apologizes for not listening to her and entering the race. At that moment, Peter runs after him, trying to pull him along so he doesn't die in front of his mother. Peter sees Raymond feeling broken and afraid of losing and never seeing his mother again, so he encourages him, reminding him that he's walked for 5 whole days and he's not far from achieving his dream. He tells him he has to fight to get back to his mother. Peter is deeply affected by what happened between Raymond and Jenny.
Because no one cared about him, he was always getting into trouble and fights in the street. One day, he chose a stronger opponent and got into a fight with him. The opponent beat him very hard, and Peter found himself in a hospital covered in wounds. That's when he realized he was wrong for confronting someone stronger than him. From that moment, Peter understood that he had to find a new life and build a hope to live on. This is why he entered the competition, and his main goal is the prize because if he wins it, he can use it to help the poor who are suffering from the same circumstances he went through. Raymond respects Peter even more than before. He decides to fight him to the end. Steve speaks to them, telling them that each one must save themselves in the remaining time of the race, as there are now only 5 of them. Suddenly, Parker makes a fateful decision, attacking one of the soldiers, taking his rifle, and finishing him off. The other soldiers then surround him and shoot him, but Parker is determined to die a dignified death. He takes the rifle and ends the fight. Raymond and Peter find Arthur bleeding profusely from his nose and unable to put weight on his leg or continue the race. Arthur asks them to deliver his necklace to his grandmother, explaining that he wanted to win the race and that he wanted to heal her. He then asks them to promise not to watch him die. As soon as Peter and Raymond promise and take the necklace from him, Arthur lets go of their hands and falls to the soldiers who finish him off immediately. Only Peter, Raymond, and Steve remain. At that moment, Steve decides to surprise them by revealing that he is the Major's illegitimate son. The Major refuses to acknowledge him. Steve tells them that he entered the race to win and make his head high in front of the world, but unfortunately he is feeling unwell due to his allergies. He decides to stop running and die, having already made his head high. Only Peter and Raymond are left. As they approach the finish line, the spectators surround them, chanting their names. At that moment, Peter decides to stop and sacrifice himself so that Raymond can achieve his dream and take revenge on the Major. But Raymond quickly goes to his aid before he dies, telling him that they must continue the journey they started together. However, Raymond resists Peter and collapses to the ground without Peter noticing. Unfortunately, Peter is shocked when he hears gunshots behind him. He quickly turns around to run to Raymond and help him up. But then, the Major considers him the winner and finishes off Raymond right in front of him. At that moment, Peter's heart breaks for his friend Raymond, and he keeps screaming at the top of his lungs. But then he decides to fulfill Raymond's dream himself. He asks the Major for a rifle because that's his wish, takes it, and shoots him in the head. The movie ends. Don't forget to follow. See you in the next summary.